Hello, everyone, and welcome to another session in our Muses series. And tonight I'm going to pull a PowerPoint up here in a moment, but we are talking about Polyhymnia, or Poly. Her name is spelt two different ways. I'm going to pronounce it as Polyhymnia. Uh, so just to keep it fluid, because these Greek names sometimes they throw me for a loop, you guys. But one of the best things about this particular muse, I mean, all the muses are amazing, but this muse is related to sacred poetry, and I'm currently doing an oracle writing course in town. So, like this series, talking about this muse came at like the perfect time personally for me. So, let me pull her up. Here we go with the screen sharing. Give me 1 second. All right. Hope you guys are doing well tonight. I'm a little bit tired, so you'll have to bear with me. It has been an exciting last few weeks, lots of community and group services, but definitely that can have a draining effect. So bear with me if I seem a little bit sluggish tonight. All right, Polyhymnia. So she is the muse of sacred song, oratory, and lyric poetry. All right, so a little snapshot here. She also, of course, is associated to art, agriculture, and eloquence. She is usually summoned or solicited for assistance during magical workings that involve herbs, herbology, mycology, so sacred mushrooms, healing specifically, crystal magic. Of course, artistic inspiration kind of extends to all of our muses. Spells to help overcome the fear of public speaking, spells for persuasion, sacred geometry, as well as fertility magic. So her symbols, often when you look at artwork that depicts Polyhymnia, you will see her in a veil, a long cloak. There's usually grapes in the scene. She usually has a somewhat pensive look. Usually, well, not usually, it really is a 50-50 split, but sometimes in her artwork depictions, she'll have a finger to her mouth like this to show silence, especially the silence that's required of contemplative and sacred poetry. So, a little bit of background on her. Obviously, of course, she was in charge of sacred song, music, dance, pantomime, which I thought was interesting, and then agriculture. And if we break down her name in Greek, poly means many, and hymnos means praise. So, many praises, polyhymnos. Again, she's kind of depicted as having a pensive, serious, or meditative look in the artwork that defines her, often dressed in those veils, those long cloaks with, a finger to her mouth. Sometimes she is resting her elbow on a stake. You'll see that as a common theme in her art representation. And she is credited as the muse of meditation and geometry. And again, that's a 50-50 split in literature when you are studying and researching her. She brought distinction to famous authors by her great praises, according to and again, my tongue gets tied up in some of these crazy words, but the Diodorus Siculus, the Bibliotheca Historica. She is referred to in current fiction works like Dante, my favorite, Dante's Divine Comedy, and the Paradiso section, Canto 23. So she and the other muses, of course, had the spring on Mount Parnassus that was sacred. Pythia, that is the priests and priestesses, use the water for oracle purposes like divination and prayers. We kind of went over this in some of the other presentations of the muses. According to the ancient Greeks and their beliefs and traditions, Polyhymnia took part in divine inspirational prayers. And really, again, that goes the course with the other muses as well. But interestingly, with her, the reason she's associated with pantomiming is because she would kind of sketch and wave her arms in the air to signify kind of a soundless voice and pass a message with her hands only. I always linked her to sign language, which they don't really reference that with Polyhymnia, but there's a lot of sign language metaphor there. Maybe she was the goddess of the deaf at some point, or hard of hearing. Now, in astrology, because I love to fuse the two because they do work together. Magic and astrology are very connected. But in astrology, there is a belt asteroid named after Polyhymnia, as was revealed by this J. Chacornac in 1854. So I have a little map here on the lower right. Here's us, Earth, right here. Hopefully, you see my little mouse moving. And then all the way out here, we see Polyhymnia. And then this is a little snapshot from a NASA article. So the asteroid Polyhymnia is what's called a Kudo. It's a compact, ultra dense object, and they believe she's composed of super heavy elements that are previously unknown to us humans. So, in other words, it does contain elements that are not on our periodic table at all. So that makes it even more magical, right? So, and then I kind of break down some of the periodic information, not really important, but for those of you who are very sciencey, that'll make sense to you. Okay, so again, her name is spelled differently in different texts. So I'm referencing her name Polyhymnia, and others it's simplified to Polyhmnia. I'm not really sure how you pronounce it without the H in there. I think it's Polyhmnia. She is credited with inventing the lyre. And, the lyre is one of those musical instruments that you see with a lot of the muses and different art depictions. And she is the inspiration of lyric poets pretty much everywhere. So, not everyone is familiar with lyric poetry. Basically, lyric poetry is very imagistic, it's very personal, it's brief, and it's full of kind of sensory detail. And it kind of represents Polyhymnia's two sides. So, I think it really does connect to the divine. It's like divine poetry because in sacred workings, those usually also are very imagistic, very personal, brief, and full of sensory detail when you have, a sacred practice, and you're meditating. It does define that experience. So at one point, I did reference it as sacred poetry. So describing the sacred is akin to trying to catch a butterfly made of light. Is that not the truth, you guys? So, when we're talking about poetry, especially poetry as being a magical tool, the challenge is not to write like a spiritual belief based, like a Christian hymn or a Buddhist chant, but it's really to find out where and how you connect to the divine in your own life and record that experience honestly. I think sometimes we get wrapped up in, I'm omnistic, but a lot of the clients I work with, they may be Buddhist, they may be Hindu, and we get wrapped up in that methodology. And so sometimes we disconnect from the just kind of raw primal authenticness. We want to attach it to deity or attach it to a belief system. And what we're saying here is if we're going to record the experience honestly and make something like sacred poetry, we need to disconnect from that just a little bit. What gives you hope? Where do you find faith when times are tough? These are the kind of questions to ask yourself. What is important is not the path you choose to seek the divine, but the act of seeking itself. And I think that's a good reminder for all of us. In that spirit, tonight I hope to challenge you to examine your beliefs, inspire you to create sacred poetry and songs as I introduce you to Polyhymnia. So, moving right along. I will tell you, before I go too fast forward here, working with Polyhymnia is a lot like Buddhist magic or Tibetan Tantra magic. And I've talked about this in my Sacred Sexuality series. And I think I have the video posted on my YouTube, the Grave Intentions YouTube, also for free. But in Tibetan Tantra practice, Buddhist magic in general, we deal with sacred sound, sacred syllables, sacred words. We put those into mantras. There are the sacred 10-syllable mantras. And so there is kind of an overlay here. I feel like this is a very Buddhist practice. But of course, Polyhymnia is very Greek. It's very much part of sacred poetry, and magic is very much part of that Roman Greek pantheon. But you have a lot of crossover with Buddhism. And so I talk about that interlay a lot. That's why I'm omnistic. You find that is very common. But I just kind of wanted to throw that out there. If that's something you want to kind of deeper dive into, that video is posted on YouTube. I think I titled it Buddhist Magic or something similar to that. All right, ritual, dance, pantomime, and meditation. So beyond vocal music, she inspires ritual dance and pantomime, which is silent. It's expressive enactment of stories or prayers. Funny side story, when the girls were little, they were in 4-H. And if you don't know what 4-H is, it's like an agriculture club, and they do like the county fairs, and they have different events throughout the year. And Maddie presented at the annual like 4-H kind of talent show, and she did a mime act, being trapped in a box. I remember that. She was really little. She had to have been in elementary school. It was the cutest, most darling thing ever. Anyway, moving on. So in Nona's Dionysiaca, I don't know if I'm saying that right, you guys. She is depicted as the nursing mother of the dance, capable of communicating meaning without words, speaking with hands and moving eyes, and a graphic picture of silence that's full of meaning. So she's always been present in religious ceremonies. If you look at, the old art depictions where movement, gesture, and silence were equally essential as spoken words. So again, I kind of associate her as the muse to the deaf. There's a lot of sign language elements there. So finally, we should keep in mind that the ancient Greeks were well known for connecting philosophy and science. And on that note, I want you to remember that she is also known as the muse of geometry and meditation. Now, I'm not jumping into that tonight. That could be a whole hour, 2 hours just on geometry alone, and another hour or two on meditation. Tonight, I did choose to deep dive into the sacred poetry, but I wanted to extend this information to you so that you had it. She's also the patronage of agriculture. So in some traditions, Polyhmnia is associated with agriculture, most notably as the mother of Triptolemus, who disseminated farming secrets to humanity on behalf of Demeter. So that final role kind of connects her to the religious aspects of the harvest. And we just had Mabon. So like she is technically a Mabon deity or associated with Mabon and the Eleusinian mysteries. So sacred poetry is incorporated into spells by using heightened language, rhythm, and symbolic meaning to create a ritualistic effect, as seen, this is actually seen quite a lot in the old Hindu texts as well, like the Atharva Veda, okay, where hymns and incantations were used for specific purposes. And now in contemporary spiritual practices, poetry itself is viewed as a form of active creative spell casting, especially for healing and especially for social change. So some examples I put here, the Vedic texts, again, ancient Hindu traditions, they do have these texts that contain spells and charms alongside these philosophical hymns, integrating poetry directly into the ritual or the magical practice. Just like in Buddhism. So it's not just Hindu, that's the same in Tibetan Tantric Buddhism. Now, in the Jewish tradition, the belief in constructive language, within that tradition holds the special power that lies in God's name. So when you hear me talk about God in a Christian sense from the, that old pagan God pantheon, I often refer to him as Tetragrammaton, Adonai, Yahweh. So these are holy words, right? And the words of the Torah. It suggests that, specific poetic phrases create desired effects. So the words themselves, the names themselves are magic. St. Patrick's Lorica, the Deer's Cry, that's also a Christian poem, lots of Christian magic. And I'm excited to do the Banned from the Bible series. That's going to be either November or December. I haven't decided yet, but we're going to get into all the secret kind of magical interlay in, Christian practice. But so the Christian poem, The Deer's Cry, is an example of a poem spell. It was believed to have been recited by St. Patrick to protect himself and his followers by disguising them as deer. And that's true. That's in a lot of texts. So that's pretty neat, right? So modern approaches, one of the books I like is called Poetry as Spellcasting. You should check it out. It views poetry as a tool for not only self-healing, but developing intuition and manifesting our desires, opening doors. So it treats writing itself as a form of ritual. So the act of writing poetry and chants, can be seen as invoking spiritual forces, deity, or energetic manipulation avenues, or harnessing language in a heightened active way that reflects what you're trying to create. So the effectiveness of these poetic spells is rooted in the belief that words, especially when chosen with intention and resonance, can have a magical or spellbinding effect. And we know this. When I do petitions before a cast, it is vocal, it is vocalized. So I'm using my voice, I'm using words, I'm using sometimes those sacred syllables, depending on how I've written out the petition, to vocalize that before a cast. Now, words like Saints' Sacred Spells, that's another great book, demonstrate how poetry, music, and spiritual practices all can be woven together to create a powerful sacred artistic practice. Sorry, I feel like I'm losing my voice, you guys. I do apologize. Now, poetry, like witchcraft and magic, is an act of transformation. So when I say my poems work as spells, I mean it in a very literal sense. And I love this little depiction of Polyhmnia here on the right. I think she's adorable here. But this is actually not something I wrote. It's a quote, and I forgot to put the poet's name here, and I apologize for that, but I wanted to read it. She states, "When I write poems, I am a saint. I am unattached from the body of the world and living only in its breath. And every passing moment in between each breath is an immortal joy. I don't write to capture this beautification. I write to find my way into it. What's left on the page afterwards is perhaps not even a trail or the spell itself, but the ashes left from the burning, the incense of my annihilation." I just think that's a beautiful poem that really expresses the power or the spell or enchantment infused aspecting of sacred poetry. Excuse me. All right. Now, in the biological classification of human spirituality, poetry is not a class, but a kingdom unto itself. What I wanted to do here was give you a list of poets that you could maybe dive deeper into if this is something that moves you. I have a variety of poets listed here. I don't really need to break it all down. You guys have the recording, so you can kind of pause this frame and do your Google searches. But there are famous practitioners of the occult who are poets. W.B. Yeats, James Merrill, Sylvia Plath. Those are occultists who were using sacred poetry in their magic. The grandfather of modern magic, Crowley himself was a poet. I actually did, that's another video on our YouTube. I'm trying to remember which video I talked about Crowley, and I think I talked about him in the traditional rites of witchcraft. And so that video is available on YouTube. Check it out. I kind of deep dive a little bit into Crowley in that particular video, but he was a poet before his spiritual visions in 1904 led him down the path to kind of found his new system of occult practices. So there are a lot of contemporary poets who openly engage with occult influence in their work or in their creative processes in creating poetry. So Conrad, Lasky, Rains, Waldman, Annie Finch, all these are examples of poets that if this is something that moves you, something that you are interested in exploring, definitely these are the names that I would start with. As the famous philosopher and historian Sholem wrote in his book On the Kabbalah and its Symbolism, symbols by their very nature are a means of expressing an experience that is in itself expressionless. I love that statement. So, with poets, in their lyric attempt at communicating the ineffable, right? Poems use symbols to execute this magic. We call them metaphor maps. And just as in spell work, with poems at root, what matters is intent. Spells are charged by the energy of the spellcaster. That's you. The force of will behind your work, what you're doing, the will that you are infusing, the energy transference. The change that poems affect upon us and in the world around us is not inherent in the words themselves, although there are sacred words, but in the power of the words of the ones, us, who write those words. So it then lies with us to cast these spells of each poem with our own intention again and again as we conjure and unify the world we seek. So just a little inspiration there. Now I'm going to go through a couple of exercises that I think really are magical, wonderful magical practices. But I need to sip here. Boy, my voice, I don't know what's going on. It can't be allergies. I mean, we're going into October for, I mean, honestly, come on. All right. So this first spell or practice, I'm sorry, a practice into using sacred poetry as spell work is called honoring your many selves. It's kind of a shadow work spell, to be honest with you. So trauma, pain, or the tides of life can really blur time. And when we have a hard time reconciling our past and present, it can feel like we are like perpetually moving between memories, like we are chasing the ghost of who we used to be, or like we are kind of perpetually looking ahead and really never finding presence. So at times it feels like we can spot a way or a path out, a sense of the future, but we are often tethered to the past, living as who we used to be, unable to move forward. So I know personally I've struggled to let go or integrate like the younger me into who I am now. I think that's all of us, right? There are parts of younger me that I need to say goodbye to and parts that I should carry with me. But it does take time and a lot of self-compassion and energy to work through this. Sometimes when we are so focused on our past, our pain, or our shame, or so focused on tomorrow, we forget to honor what today is all about, what right now feels like, and we lose it. Again, I talk about in a lot of my presentations, time is a currency. It is the most important currency we have. We cannot earn it. All we can do is spend it. And when it's gone, it's gone. And the right now really is the only thing that matters, right? Is right now in this moment, not the last 5 minutes, not the next 5 minutes, but right now. In this writing based accessible ritual that I'm going to roll out here for you, you're going to work with your many selves. You're going to take a moment to be in tune with the past and the present and the future, to give each self some space, a pause, a breath, and a moment of prayer and hope, to see your many layers and to find some perspective there. A ritual selves is what this is called. It's a candle magic writing practice that requires 3 candles, a few pieces of paper as small as your hand, and some string cut into maybe like 1 inch long strings. What you release, honor, and call forth in this exercise is up to you. You can release, for example, shame, you can honor resilience, and you can call forth creativity. What you meditate on can be material or it can be emotional. Just be thoughtful. Work within a realm of possibility. Acknowledge that intention must be nurtured by action and intention. Such an important thing in spell work in general. We create these elaborate tools and, we release this amazing energy and then we need to walk away from it. But we also need to be mindful that in our lives, we are taking action that helps to open doors with that energy. If we're working against it, it can be problematic. Now, your candles may be any color that speaks to you. I often correspond color to energy or ideas, like, yellow could be for creativity, purple for spiritual power, pink for love and healing, green for opportunity. These are just examples. Use whatever color speaks to you. All right, so settle your thoughts and think about your past, present, and future. That's step 1 of this. Before anything, you're going to sit quietly in your space and think on something from your past. Think of something in your present that you want to acknowledge and honor, something you'd like to, generate or create for your future. So the very first step of this is working with the past. You're going to light that first candle with intention as you think of what you want to release. And you're going to speak the words out loud. With this light of the past, I release blank, whatever that is. Write that onto your paper, what you release, and whatever words you'd like. Scroll or roll that paper up and just tie that scroll with one of the little strings around the bottom of the candle, and you're going to let that candle burn. Now you move on to the present, working with the present. You're going to light the second candle with the intention as you think of what you honor about your current life. And you're going to speak with this light of the present, I honor blank. Write onto your paper what you honor and whatever words you'd like. Again, scroll and roll that paper, tie it around the bottom of the candle, and let it burn. The third step here is working with the future, right? Light the third candle with intention as you think of what you are calling forth for yourself. Speak with this light of the future, I manifest blank. Again, same thing. Write it onto your paper, however you want to write it. Write this in the present tense as if you have it already, right? Don't use words like I need or I want. You write it like you have it, you've acquired it. Scroll roll that paper, tie it around the bottom of the candle, and let it burn. All right. Now, if you're going to use sacred poetry and magic, that is the first spell I would like for you to try. That is a little bit of a shadow work spell, but it's going to give you clarity. It's going to infuse you with the drive you need, your inner drive to use sacred poetry as spell crafting. Now, here's the second exercise I'd like you to try. This is much more shadow worky. It's an 11-line poetry spell for healing. So it's a writing ritual that includes an 11-line spell poem recipe, which you're going to write, and a meditation. The goal here is to tend to the wound. We all have wounds. If you're alive, if you're breathing air, if you're sitting here listening to this right now, you have wounds. Now, in this healing spell poem, which functions as both a method of shadow work and as a spell, as you know, it is your will and emotion which powers it. You know, that's what powers both those things. You will acknowledge the wound in you, whatever that wound might be. It could be today's anxiety, it could be yesterday's lingering fear, it could be physical, or it could be immaterial. It's the key here is self-honesty. Now you're also going to write about the medicine. And I've talked about this again in previous videos. I think it may be in our astrology series. I might have talked about this at great length. I can't remember, but so I believe we all hold some form of medicine. I did. I talked about this when I did midlife astrology, and I was talking about Chiron. Anyway, sorry, my brain sometimes. So I believe we all hold some form of medicine or the key within ourselves. Perhaps the medicine is external. It could be systemic change, a new world. It's okay to write about that too. It's okay to want big, beautiful, powerful global change just as it's okay to write toward the practical or the mundane or the small ways we forge ahead in our own healing. There's no right or wrong. So I invite you to tend to the wound with me. I've done this a few times. Each time I have done it, it carries a lot of transformative power. It's simple, but that doesn't mean it's always easy. Sometimes the simplest spells, the simplest practices can be the most complex. Remember that. You know, we see these depictions of high ceremony and ritual, like when we're talking about like the traditional rites of witchcraft, you know, the compass round, things like this. Those to me are easier or simpler than me doing something like this because I have to deep dive into emotional constructs, very fortified emotional constructs. I find that to be much more complex than just memorizing some lines or some footwork or what goes into the cauldron first, second, or third. So I do recommend that you make sure you're in a safe, supportive environment while working through this. Maybe that means grounding in a space that feels safe. You know, and light, the energy is light, and, you know, maybe having someone to talk to if you need support because it is shadow work. All right, so the pre-writing meditation, you're going to become soft. You're going to let your heart bloom. You're going to sigh wholly and become loose and just beautiful, right? Shut the door to fear. Listen to what the fear has to say, of course, but walk into the room of self, that great gilded palace of self. Feel the waters of truth cleanse your feet, your hands, your softness. Stand before the mirror and stare into your wound. Meet it with grace and compassion. The scars will soften. The tissue expands to be held and to hold you. This is the kingdom of the heart. What does it feel like to acknowledge the wound? Now, this is the time you're going to write after you do this meditation. Excuse me. So, first, describe the wound in 5 lines. What's its color, shape, mood? You know, is it blue? Is it frightening? Is it bone tired? Is it a beast of poverty, of loneliness, of blood? 5 lines describe the wound. Next, I want you just to describe the medicine in 5 lines. Is it sunlight on the lake? Is it a burial, a refusal, an acceptance, a new home, a medication, your voice? This is up to you. You know intuitively what heals you. 5 lines of medicine. Now, write your last line. This is when you cast your spell. It's what you tell the ocean about your pain. It's your greatest hope. It's your belief in self and relief and healing. You're going to give this everything you have. This part 3 here, your last and final singular line. So after you've tried these exercises, let me give you a little bit more in terms of guidance with using, or writing powerful poetry spells. So poetry is magic and poems are spells. The spirituality of poetry is clear, but it's not always obvious. Like many paths and practices, especially, witchcraft, folk magic, we're talking Southern Conjure, we're talking powwow, Appalachia Dutch. There's so many offshoots. Poetry is a way towards self-reclamation, finding autonomy, understanding yourself and the world, and getting in touch with the divine, mysterious force that is external and internal. It's always within us. And that usually takes the face of creativity, right? So, like a spell, a poem is born of intent and uses specific ingredients. Poetry is shadow work, a way of mining the depths. And through that act, it is a torch of illumination. If we are the soil, the poetry is the rose that blooms, and the magic, that's what brings it to the surface. So, why poetry? So poetry moves and slides and breaks rules. In fact, we make the rules as we write it in poetry, right? In any kind of writing, really. It defies structure. It's a living art form, ever changing. Its power lies in what it contains, what it doesn't, what it gives, and what it hides in its white spaces. And it thrives in liminal spaces. It is witchcraft. It says, I won't tell you the truth, but I'll tell you a part of it. I love that. Poetry gives you clues. It asks you to think. It reveals according to its own rules. And that's why we always ask, but what is it about? Sometimes you don't need to know. And that mystery makes it so beautiful, both to read and to write. It helps us stretch our imaginations, get out of our comfort zones, and offers a glimpse of something that one might never see or realize or even pay attention to. So, like one's own magical craft, poetry asks us to return to the process. It asks us to spend time with it, nurture it, and go deeper. So you're never done, with learning as a practitioner of any sort. There's always more questions and there's always more epiphanies and there are always more poems to download, meditate over, and to write. When we work in spirit and we use these spiritual tools, it is a lifetime of learning and growing. There's never an end. You don't get to year, 7 and get that PhD after writing a thesis. It's just forever until the day that you physically leave this plane of existence. Poets are the alchemists of the page. Poetry is alchemy. As witches, we carry and work with the great energy within us. We are always aware of directing or manipulating energy and emotion. This is such an incredible thing because it really allows us to make the choices that enable us to be free, find relief, find purpose, find power, and find clarity, to divine, to grow. Poets do this too. Even if unconsciously, we bring energy and emotion to the page. We manipulate that energy and emotion, deeply aware of its powers and its meaning, how we are changing with every line we write. We create our altars on the page when we use sacred poetry, pulling together our tools and objects, which are words, sounds, space to cast our spells. And so just like traditional witches, poetry witches love rituals and, the wine, the cigarette, the cleansed space to work in, a quieting. So each word is meticulously selected as an ingredient or power object. You can relate it to mugwort and rootwort compounding. You're always using mugwort and rootwort compounds. Each stanza is a breath of purpose, a standing in the crossroads work. Each turn of phrase, a candle lit by the wick of another, candle magic. And when read aloud all at once, a spell is cast or activated. I really love that. It's a good visual representation or description of the magic of poetry and how it is basically the same thing, just a different methodology. Now, how to write poetry spells and practice wordcraft. So there are many ways to write poetry spells. The poem itself can work as a spell through its language. So calling on what you want or releasing something, or through its structure and pacing. Emphasizing breath work and musicality can create almost like a prayer-like experience. One of the girls in my Oracle writing class, she actually shared a spell with us. I think it was Monday night, and she sang it. She sang it. And I thought, wow, that was such a powerful way to release it. So you can also create poetry spells by focusing each line or section on a specific intention, color, archetype, or goal. By the way, don't feel constrained or pressured by ideas of good poetry or popular poetry. These poems are for you, they're your magic, they're your essence. They're not meant to be published or shared with the world. I mean, maybe someday if you save them all in a grimoire, you could publish them, but that's not what you're creating them for. Write the poetry that speaks to you in your voice in whatever language you want to write in. There are no right and wrongs here. No special formulas that you can't create on you. You can create your own formulas. Here are some of my favorite techniques. So let's break that down. First, writing consciously. So whether we realize it or not, when we write poetry, we are programming our creation with our intention. Like drawing a sigil, a poem is the shape and sound of our intent. Is it a poem of personal power? Is it a poem of memory? Is it a poem that recalls love? Is it a poem of reclamation? Being conscious of what we're feeling, what you're feeling, and programming your poem to achieve a certain goal when it's read out loud or finished, you're imbuing your poem with power. It is a spell casting. So, and like an incantation or a mantra, like in Buddhism, we can read a poem anytime to evoke the energy we program to it. Just like pulling out that sigil. It will always be there, encapsulated at the moment we created it. And it can transport us, infuse us, or remind us to, with that intention. So it's like a sacred object or sacred artifact or magical artifact. Almost, you could even say a talisman, like an energetic talisman. All right, my next suggestion here. Oh, I gotta move this box. I've been pretty lucky with the box tonight, but now here it is in my way. Write a poetry spell with a certain number of lines or stanzas. So lines are called stanzas. So with this, practice technique, you'll dedicate each line or stanza to a specific idea or feeling you'd like to conjure, to let go of, or release. Each line, in effect, will give you the opportunity to focus your intention and your energy. This is where poetry spells really get powerful since you can focus stanzas or lines on archetypes, gods, goddesses, guides, ancestral symbols, power colors, sacred sounds, goals, or any kind of conjuring, right? So that's a good practice technique. Next, write automatically. I really like this, technique as well. So on the other end of writing with conscious intention, automatic writing is a way of writing. It's so funny too, because I think, was it last night on TikTok? Maybe it was this morning. I did a short little video of years past things that I've done with my conjure miniatures in the month of October. And a couple years ago, I made these tiny 1/12 scale automatic writing planchettes with these little tiny pencils in them. And I had those in the dollhouse at the table, and my little 1/12 scale dolls were automatic writing. It was adorable. Sorry, again, I'm off track tonight. Anyways, automatic writing is a way of writing freely without censorship or goal in a sort of trance state. So you want to think of yourself as a vessel, downloading the information and translating it to the page. Writing a poem this way means writing anything that comes to mind, and anything and everything should be written. And then you can decipher that when you're in a more conscious state. I actually really enjoy automatic writing. If you are a journaler, if that's part of your practice, journaling is a lot, can become like automatic writing sessions. I encourage that. More ideas here for you. Write the liminal. Write a poem that speaks of the in between, the crossroads, the liminal spaces. What does it look, what does it look at dusk? What does it look like to be almost touched, almost loved, almost lost? How you capture what feels to straddle the liminal in a poem. Word worship. There is a book of poetic spells called The Lost Words. I do recommend it. It's aimed to kind of reclaim and celebrate natural words that were taken out of the Oxford Junior Dictionary. I think they used, I don't know if I used all of the example words here, but adder, bluebell, dandelion, fern, heron, otter, and willow were replaced with words like blog, broadband, bullet point, cut and paste, and voicemail. So, what words mean something to you is the whole idea of word symbolism, right? What words speak to your memories of an object or personal power? Are there words that speak to your identity, your resistance, your body, your journey? Choose 5 of these words and, write a 5 stanza or 5-line poem using each of those words, or, write 5 individual poems as a set to be read out loud together, utilizing each word. When you speak them out loud, you can call on those qualities. So that's kind of a word worship exercise, like word transference. And then there's dream poetry. I'm a big advocate of dream work. As a matter of fact, for those of you in the $10 a month tier and higher, we do have our live dream tending session this Friday. I gotta remember to put the link up. Anyway, dream poetry. When we wake up, our minds are loose and fluid, capable of magic, still tethered to the other conscious states or the liminal. Once awake, tap into that dream space and write a poem about your dream. Let its contradictions and messiness and weirdness soak into your poetry. Don't try to define it or, clean it up. What is the dream's message? Write that message into your poem. So in this way, you are divining from the subconscious mind, mining the dreamscape, and channeling it from the other into a physical thing to be explored and tapped into. You can dedicate a whole section of your grimoire or journal or dream journal to dream poetry, and you'll watch the themes and messages unravel over time, allowing you to kind of swim in a literary sea of the self, because oftentimes our higher self is there communicating with us. So funny, because I think last month I did the lightning dream technique. I taught that in our monthly dream tending group. And we talk about divining in a dream state or divination dream work. So again, another free video on our YouTube. But if dream poetry speaks to you, definitely look into the lightning dream method or the lightning dream technique, because that's very divinatory. Then there's herbal poetics. Oh, that box is back. Oh my goodness. I made it so far into this tonight without an issue. And now this box is just going to be, there we go. All right. Are you a fan of cannabis or mugwort? Everybody knows, if you've watched any of my videos, I love mugwort and cannabis occasionally. Both are used for spiritual purposes, opening a sort of mental portal. Now, in a higher state, write what comes to mind. Don't bother making sense or trying to define meaning right away. Just let the feelings guide you. Ride the wave of the self and let your words slip onto paper unregulated. You can light your joint with the flame from a candle lit in your sacred space if you wanted to. These poems capture the experience of liminality, highness, and the dream state. As you write, you are channeling, you're translating, you're creating a space of sacred connection. A spell is an active, dynamic thing, one that is created as it is cast. I hope that makes sense. Again, a spell is an active, dynamic thing, one that is created as it is cast. Every time you read your poem out loud afterward, it can call on that same energy. Again, just like sigil work. Smoking the holy herb is a spiritual act, one that puts you in touch with the 4 elements, and when practiced correctly, can lift the veil, reveal all of nature's secrets. That's a quote. And again, I forgot to put the name. I'm sorry. Just remember, stay safe, be legal, and you should talk to a doctor before using any psychoactive substance. My goodness, the more I talk, the more cloggy I'm getting. I hope I don't sound funny. I'm sure you guys don't care if I do, but all right. So this is this is the final exercise I kind of wanted to share with you. I got to move me out of the way again. I love this exercise. I think it's a beautiful, wonderful exercise, and it's especially good if you are doing muse work, if you are new to sacred poetry, if you want to dip your toe into using poems as spells just to see how you like the flavor. Um, and what you do with this, the only thing you need for this really is some paper, or a notebook to write with, a pen or a pencil, and a cheap Oracle deck. You can get Oracle decks on Amazon for $5. Basically like an affirmation Oracle deck, with that divine messaging, they have so many of them. Just pick one. It doesn't have to be any specific kind, just a messaging deck. Well, excuse me. So with this exercise, we're going to combine intuitive writing with oracle cards that inspire poetry. We're going to use the oracle cards for our storytelling and our intuitive writing to elevate our word choice by creating metaphor maps and craft a compelling poetry or poem with deeper clarity and creative flow. We're going to learn to unlock emotions and memories for and from our poems. It's very healing centered, this activity, because it's inviting you to explore self-expression and vulnerability through meditative writing, oracle cards, and creative prompts. So you're going to craft an intuitive affirmation poem using these tools and emotional insights that we're going to teach you how to walk through tonight in this last exercise. And then you can choose to transfer these words. Suggestions here is you can transfer your words onto like a glass plate with Sharpies and then turn your story into a piece of visual art. And if you want to release it, if you want to have a powerful release, go and smash the plate in a symbolic act of breaking free from fear, limits, or old narratives. You can transform pain into poetry. Or I put on here, light up your language. You can do sort of a feel-good fusion of poetry and candle making. For those of you who are candle makers like me, you work with wax, pouring wax. You can write some free verse self-affirming poems that speak to your truth, your purpose, your personal glow, and then hand pour your own candle, infuse it with your intention, add your scents, add your style, and then you can actually wick your poem or wick your candle with that poem. You can, if you use wooden wicks, those are best. You can just kind of write it on the wooden wick if you wanted to, or you can scroll it and roll it and put it in there, so that it's burnt as part of the, the spell release. But you cast a flame that holds your words and a poem that smells like you on your best day. So I love that. There's a very definitive infusion that takes place with the candle making method. But those are just, some suggestions. All right. So step one, the first thing with this exercise, we're going to do some automatic writing. Only spend about 5 minutes on this. So set a timer. I set a timer for 5 minutes and I'm going to give you my example. I'm actually giving you personal examples. I don't always do that. Sometimes I'm a little introverted with my personal practice work, but I thought, let me share my personal examples with you guys to give you kind of a flavor. So do a meditation, ground, get yourself in the right headspace, make sure your environment is set up for, meditative writing. Once you're ready, have your paper and your pencil in front of you, set your timer for 5 minutes. So I forget which day I did this. What day did I do this? I want to say this was, it was right after I did the Maven cast, but before I did the astrological cast. So was that Monday? I can't even remember now. But anyways, here's what I wrote. This is what came out of me in those 5 minutes. I am tired. Reversing old ingrained habits, patterns, routines, rituals is exhausting. No one ever talks about that. Tomorrow is the Neptune opposition, and I'm too tired to create offering. Wednesday is the Saturn opposition, and I'm scared as hell about what old karma that's going to dredge up. Oh well, life moves forward and so must I. That old saying, no rest for the wicked. Although I don't consider myself wicked, but then again, does someone wicked have the ability to sniff that out on their own persona? I imagine ego would take great care and measure to conceal such awful truth. Shadow work. This is an excellent time to tackle the golden shadow, but I won't. So as you can see, as I was doing my automatic writing, maybe I wasn't in the best mood, but it's good because I was trying to kind of navigate and figure out what's going on with me. Why am I feeling, this way? I'm not asking those questions, but I'm writing and purging what's coming out. Shadow work, as you see, started coming out at the end. So that was a good reminder that I needed to get back to maybe my shadow work practice. But that's your first step one. Do this 5-minute automatic writing. See, we're going to compare this to your poem because you're going to see how it interconnects. So set that page aside. Step two, pull out your Oracle deck now. You're going to pull cards, no more than 2. You can do 1 if you want. And we're going to look at the meaning of the cards, what's written on them. Also things like color. I believe in color association. And we're going to review our cards and we're going to create word associations or statements. So these are the cards I pulled. And there was a little sticker that came out. The sticker said, whatever it takes. The first card said release. Today I release limiting beliefs, harmful thoughts, toxic patterns, and anything out of alignment. I am ready for transformation and welcome this shift. I am creating space for a new chapter filled with love, abundance, and amazing opportunities. So compare that to my automatic writing I just did. And then these are the cards I pulled. So watch as the correlations flow here. This is divine. There is divine messaging. My second card said conscious focus. What I focus on, I attract more of. Starting with today, I will be more conscious of what I choose to spend time speaking or thinking of. I will do more of the things that bring me joy and see as more of these things begin to effortlessly flow into my life. So again, Spirit, listen to my automatic writing and is responding through Oracle. So what I'm doing now, what you're going to do now is you're going to look at your card, the messaging, color color associations, whatever image associations. And I don't want you to overthink it, but what we're going to do is write word associations or short statements. So for my example, what I did for my release card, the associations to me were money, because you can't really tell in the picture, but the card's kind of green. Maven, abundance, prosperity, nature, Ganesh, the deity, earth, wisdom, and jealousy. Again, don't overthink it. Just write down what is coming through you. With my conscious focus card, I wrote down Mars, the planet Mars, love, lust, volatility, reactivity, fire, blood, anger, frustration, open enemies. And I even had some short statements for this one. Be more self-focused. It's okay to be selfish. It's okay to say no. Establish and reinforce boundaries. And then with the sticker, I even did some word association here. The sticker says whatever it takes. So I had all short statements for this one. Change is hard. Sacrifice. No rewards without risk. Risk taking. Do the thing anyways. See what happens. Even failing opens doors, and that is very true. Even when we fail at something, we've opened a door. But those were my word associations or short statements for the cards I pulled in my oracle. So that's what I want you to do. Don't spend a lot of time on this. Give yourself maybe 5-10 minutes tops, especially if you chose 2 cards. Go through, do some word associations and statements for each of your cards and just let it flow. Don't judge it. Don't say, well, that doesn't make sense. Just whatever comes to you, write it down. We're going to be using this later. So set that aside once you've completed that. Set your timer on your cell phone so you have somebody keeping track of time. All right, hang on. This third prompt, again, it's part of us creating this poem, this sacred magical poem. Step 3, 3 energies that you carry, and we're going to use 3 representative objects of those energies. And then we're going to connect them into a sentence or a statement, those 3 energies and through 3 representations. So let me explain that to you by using my example. So three energies that I carry with me when I was doing this exercise was indecision, navigation, and desire. So then I asked myself, what objects, physical, tangible objects, do I associate to those energies? One per energy. So indecision, I thought scissors. That was the first image that popped in my mind. So I wrote down scissors. Then I looked at navigation, that navigation energy. The first image that popped into my mind was a compass. So I wrote that down. My third energy that I was carrying in that moment that I felt strongly, desire. The first thing that popped into my mind was a book. So I wrote down book. Again, this is very rapid fire. Like you can't overthink this. It's the first, when you do your three energies, what are those first three energies? Don't search around and try to find an ideal energy. Just what are the first three that come to you? Same thing when you look at your energy, like indecision, the very first image or idea that comes into your mind, that is the right answer. It may not make sense. It may not seem to correlate or fit, but that is what you're going to write down. Now we're going to take our energy, we're going to take our representative objects, and we are going to make these three short little sentences. So indecision and scissors was my first energy and representative object. My sentence was indecision with my dull scissors. Doesn't make much sense, but it's a sentence. Again, don't overthink it. Time yourself 30 seconds. Navigation and compass. My sentence, navigating with a magnetized compass. So for those of you that don't know what that means, if a compass has been magnetized, it's just going to spin. It's not going to tell you where you're going. Lastly, desire and book. My sentence, desire, raging like an inaccessible book upon accessibility is blank. So I don't know why that last one was so intense, but it was when I was doing the exercise. And that's okay. You could have intense sentences too. Don't overthink it. This is very intuitive. It's very intuitive. First things that come into your mind, even if they don't make sense, write it down. Now, after you finish this step, I want you to, set that page aside. Now, step 4, we are going to pull cards again. No more than 3. I would pull at least 2, 3 at the max. Now, I am going to share with you the 3 cards that I pulled. The first card, Water My Dreams. All I desire, isn't that funny? That was one of my words, one of my energies. All I desire is on its way to me, but like a seed, my dreams too must be watered. My belief and determination is what makes them grow. I will be patient throughout this journey. It is all unfolding at the perfect time. The second card, I am enough. I am beautiful just as I am. I am loved just as I am. I am worthy just by being me. I don't need to fit in. I just need to be myself, and the right people will come into my life. Those who see and appreciate me for all that I am. And my final card here, sorry, there's a little gnat around my face. I don't know how this little shit got in here, but oh, banana peels. Damn it. I gotta take care of these banana peels. Okay, dance it out was my third card. I can move emotions through my body by dancing. Whenever I start to feel built up energy or crankiness, I will play some music and move intuitively. I don't have to look a certain way. Simply move and feel as the stress or heaviness begins to ease out of my body. So these were my 3 divine messaging cards that Spirit's been paying attention, step 1, step 2, step 3, and now Spirit is telling me what they're thinking in step 4, right? Now, let's move on to step 5. This one gnat is ridiculous, and it needs to go fuck off here. I'm gonna write a poem about gnats fucking off. All right, hang on. All right, step 5. We are going to write an ode to something using metaphor. I talked about metaphor maps. We just created metaphor maps with word associations and representations. That's what a metaphor map is. It's an invaluable practice if you're using poetry as a manifestation tool. Now, when we write an ode to something using metaphor, it's important to be vulnerable and be honest and use a prompt. Now, I'm giving us the prompt, my heart is blank. Now, using everything we just did, step 1 with our automatic writing, step 2 with the word association oracle pull, step 3 with our energy and object representation and sentence creation. Step 4, the universe giving us their divine insight into our progress. Here in step 5, we're taking all of that. Pull out your pages. Look at number 1, 2, 3, and 4. What did you write, automatically? What were your word associations to your initial oracle? What were those oracles? What was your energetic and object affiliations and sentences when you did your word associations there, your metaphor maps? What did Spirit just tell you in these last oracles? Look at all that. Take about 5 minutes. Don't do more than 5 minutes, because what happens is we start to overthink things. We start assigning meaning that shouldn't be assigned. I want you to use this as an intuitive act of, coming into spell crafting with poems. Now, I did that. I went back, I looked at everything from step 1 to step 4, and I gave myself 5 minutes to review it, and I gave myself 5 minutes to write my ode. So cap yourself off 5-10 minutes max. Set an alarm on your phone. Don't overdo it because you're going to overthink it. Do not go back and change things. Write them as they come out of your brain. Do not go back and change anything. Keep it all the way it is. So using that prompt, my heart is, here is the poem that I wrote, looking at everything I just shared with you. I titled my ode to Karma. Saturn, you son of a bitch. Seriously though, my heart is, that's how you're going to start your poem. And here it goes. My heart is the scent of soil after a thunderstorm, mossy, fresh, alive, water saturated dirt. My heart is a seed, seeds buried within, planted in wait. The rain infusing strength and power. The seed sprouts and breaks free from the now suffocating thick black earth into the light. The sun's rays, now clearing the clouds, gently touch the new sprig. The sprig, fresh, new, vulnerable, alone, reaching to this new light. Blinding, new, fear-inducing, friend or foe. Too late, the reach has been made. What comes next? The sun whispers sweet promises, but the earth still holds on tightly, rooted, cementing. The hanged man of the elements. What a beautiful, horrifying, confusing new world. Now I meet the wind. Oh, how it tests my new strength. My sprig so fragile. It bends me, but I do not break. This bending seems relentless. How flexible this sprig. So that is what I wrote. That is what intuitively came through me. I was actually surprised. I didn't really think it was anything until I put it together, but it definitely touched on so many different things, and I always say it is important to look at what you've created to see, maybe to have those insights we need for healing or for navigation purposes in our life, our direction. But again, don't overdo it. For me, when I look at this poem, I've gone through a lot of transition this last year. I moved to a different city. I'm doing new things in new places, kind of living a new life. And that can be a little intimidating, because I was so familiar with the old. Now I'm trying to get into a routine in the new. And I think a lot of that came out in this poem. I also think that as I read my poem, I talk about the seed and the sprig as these entities, but near the end, I'm personalizing it. I'm becoming it. It becomes like it's no longer a third party. I'm referencing I. So it's like I think I'm coming into like my being. So again, I'm just giving you an example of how I went through the interpretation process with mine. I don't like to overdo it too much, but once you create your ode and your alarm goes off, stop writing and go back and look at it. Read it a couple times, sleep on it. What does it mean to you? But I think this is a very valuable exercise, not only for healing, empowering, but also getting into a groove of creating poems with magical purpose that we could use in spell casting. And an oracle deck is a really nice tool to use to help facilitate that, because you have that divinity coming in, that divine messaging. And of course, if you're going to do sacred poetry, whether it's for spell casting or just for funsies or just as a journaling tool for a meditation tool. I would invoke, of course, Polyhmnia, our beautiful muse, who this presentation was on tonight. Polyhmnia, this is her astrology sign. If you know, the two are very connected, astrology and magic. If you do any astrology, she is a trans Neptunian aspect, so you will see her on certain charts and different methods of astrology. You know, Uranian, Vedic, um, evolutionary, horary. You will see Polyhymna in there, her sign, and that is how it is represented. Asteroid number 33. And then there's a little key facts chart. I know I didn't do a deep dive on her. I feel like with the other muses, I deep dive into like the siblings and the parents, and it's so confusing. So I thought instead of doing that and confusing everybody tonight, I would just give you this cute little, oh, let me move this box out of the way. This cute little cheat chart here. So, like, if you were curious, her parents, her consorts, offspring, you know, her domains that she overseen magically, her symbols, the best known myths about her. I kind of put this all in a chart for you to have. Because again, sometimes we get lost in that in the presentation. It can be very confusing. So I thought, well, I'll just do a chart tonight. All right, you guys, that is it. You know, as always, I want to thank you. I appreciate all of your guys' support through Patreon. Let me end sharing here. I always appreciate all of your support through Patreon. Your support allows me to continue doing these EDUs, as I call them, and kind of sharing this information, you know, sharing tools, kind of growing community so we can each grow in our practice. And as always, if you guys have any follow-up questions, anything you want to share, you know, let me know. I was considering after the Muse series completes, there's 9 muses. So after 9 months, right? I forget which month we're in. I think we're in month 4 or 5. I can't remember. But I was thinking about doing a series on sacred poetry or spell crafting poetry, um, or intuitive writing in general, and that would be a live Zoom once a month, you know, for all of our members in the $5 a month tier and higher. That would replace, you know, the muses once we complete the muse series. It would be very similar to our live dream tending, only it would be more structured, where we would be doing exercises like the one I just ended with, steps 1 through 5. That would be, I think, maybe something fun if we did a group. That way we could all project on each other's, you know, messaging without, you know, which is great. In dream tending, that's what we do. We explain our dream in detail and we don't try to assign meaning. We don't try to explain it, but all the other members in the group will project their interpretation to the dreamer just for, I guess, you know, a little flavor. You know, everybody interprets differently. It's nice to have multiple varied viewpoints. Same thing in poetry, you know, or intuitive writing. We could do something very similar to that. So let me know your thoughts. I'm always looking for feedback, yay or nay, or other ideas that you may have. You know, you could private message me or post them right on our Patreon. I'm always on there. So, all right, you guys, stay magical and have a wonderful evening. Sorry about my allergies and my voice tonight. If it's not one thing, another, it's another. I swear, especially this time of year. But anyways, take care.